Hello, Aaron Sanders, this Agile guy here. Today I have with me Enrico Teotti. We are going to talk about Agile retrospectives. Hello, Enrico.
Hey everyone. Hello, Aaron. It's good to see you.
Hello. Nice to see you too. How are you today?
Pretty good. Actually, tomorrow is my birthday, so yeah,
Oh, happy
that's
birthday.
exciting. Thank
Yeah,
you.
another holiday season baby. I just had mine a couple of weeks ago, so congratulations. Birthdays and end of the year are really a time of reflection. I think it's so appropriate. We're talking about Agile retrospectives. What got you into this? It seems to be a passion of yours, the retrospective.
Yeah. So I think so. Most of my career I spent as a software developer. Started back in 2001, and I have to say at the very beginning there was like a mindset that there was you had to work hard, and then someone would make a mistake, and then finding out whose fault was part of like working. So finger pointing, blaming
Mhm.
was kind of part of the cultures that I was working with. And then during the years, I realized how kind of like toxic that approach was and how kind of pointless as well. And that's around the time that I started being hanging out more in the kind of like agile space. And I think when I first heard of retrospective, I have to say I was concerned that
Mm.
I would be blamed,
Oh,
concerned that in a retrospective, oh, they will find out, oh, you made this mistake. And that was kind of like the first idea that I had of retrospective. The reason for that is it was explained to me in a poor way, at least for me. I didn't understand like what the purpose was, or maybe the environment at the time wasn't a good environment to foster that. That is a very first important thing in a retrospective, which is psychological safety, making sure that people feels like they can share without judging or without that blaming. And so once I realized that, but there was two things. One, that kind of the fear or the idea that okay, this is going to be a finger pointing session, and then there was the other part of me that I was like, well, this has a lot of potential. And so I started like reading on my own time and finding out more about that concept. And that's when I kind of started realizing the potential of it. And I think the first stop was the Agile Retrospective book by Diana Larsen and Esther Derby. And as of today, I think that is still the book that has the most value. That and the Project Retrospective book by Norm Kerr. And there is a
I
lot of
agree.
focus on activities on
Hmm.
retrospectives, but that book has a lot of the core concepts that make it so good. And by practicing it, what I realized is that I was happier, and the teams I was working with, they were more conducive of good outcomes. And that's, I guess, when, as a developer, I felt the value of it. And during my career transition to product management and facilitation, and that just enhanced even more than my passion for that, for the retrospective topic.
I'm relating quite a bit. I mean, it sounds like there was some fear because you're in a blame culture, but when you realized with the value of courage, you could really show up with that psychological safety uh, and getting that book. That's where I relate. I went as well from software developer to facilitator coach, and it was my coach at the time buying me that book, saying, "I think this will help you and your teams like nothing else." Uh, and it is full of activities. What do you find helpful in that book, or if you're putting a retrospective together, what's the way to look at those activities and figure out what works well together?
Yeah. So, I mean, the book has um, those 5 steps, has that 5 step framework that to me is the most important part of it. There's
You
also
want to show
activities.
us?
Yeah, actually, I can do that with my iPad. So let me switch this up.
I'll go here. Get out your way.
And yeah, so I guess those 5 steps are really like important and critical. And very often we focus on the retro activities. And like the 3 columns, the 4 Ls, the sailboat, the radar, and we forget about those 5 steps, which the book gives a lot of detail, a lot of valuable detail. And you start with setting the stage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the closing one, and then you close. So I'm going to jump from number 1 to number 5, and then I'm going to like describe what's in the middle, because they're all important, and sometimes we miss some of those. But setting the stage is where it's kind of linked to the psychological safety portion of this. So when you set the stage, you give time to the group to kind of like self-assess. How are we doing in terms of like, are we going to talk about stuff? And there are like techniques that you can do, but that step there is for that to kind of like focus on what is about to happen. Pause a little bit. We all go fast and do things during the day. Set the stage is only a few minutes, maybe 5 in an hour. Can be sufficient, 5 to 10 minutes. Just kind of slow down and focus on the purpose. Why are we here? What are we trying to achieve in this hour? And the closing is, to me, another critical piece, because it's where you kind of like define, okay, what have we achieved in this hour? What are the next steps? Is it clear? And how was this retrospective? So running a little retro on the retro itself is critical. In the middle, we have the guided data. And you generate insights.
I always get the names wrong. I think about sense making and generating insights, or find patterns. I'm like, oh yeah, it's called generate insights. Gather data, not generate info. Sometimes I get a little confused.
And I've interviewed Diana about, I have this retrospective facilitation podcast, and I've interviewed her on why do we need 5 steps?
Yep.
And I mean, to me, like the middle is where most people think retrospectives are.
Yep.
You gather data, and then people, in my experience, they jump to, okay, what do we do about it?
Correct. Because we're problem solvers, right? As developers. So we're like, I know the problem. Here's the solution. And just jump there.
So it's very linear, kind of like cause and effect. Okay, there is this thing, here's how I fix it. And again, that's not necessarily bad. The problem is when that is the only approach that people take. And when, again, people are focused on those like 3 columns approaches, it kind of like foster this thinking, missing this piece in the middle. The generating insights is where you can, again, slow down a bit and think, what are the possibilities? You foster this divergent thinking. And so those are the 5 steps that I think are really the most important portion of the book. There is also activities, which I think are good. But I mean, activities to me are just like a thing that you do inside the framework. So there is an activity for setting the stage. There is an activity to gather data. There is an activity to generate insights. There is one to decide what to do, one to close. And you kind of like mold them together based on the context. But yeah, to back to the initial question, the biggest thing that the book offers to me is details on the purpose of each step and details on the preparation. That's another critical thing before the 5 steps. Oftentimes people jump into the retro without really preparing. And that to me is a wasted opportunity, really.
Okay.
And I understand that we are always in a rush. And when I was a product manager or a developer, it was hard, because you get to the retro time and, okay, now what do we do? Okay, we put on the 3 columns. It's easy. It's really easy and really enticing to go the path that we already know. But over time, this cause and effect, this kind of like gather data, decide what to do, which some formats really foster, is limiting. You get this feeling of picking on low-hanging fruit. And so the next step, the next kind of like power that really should be implemented from the start, in my opinion, is using these 5 steps. Assuming, again, that you have psychological safety. That's really the kind of like, without that, the retro will kind of like, it can backfire. It can, so knowing what level of psychological safety you have, it's really important to know what's going to happen next. So yeah, if you haven't read the book, or even if you've read the book, like go back and read it again. I recently kind of like read chapters of it. And I'll honestly say, I was thinking maybe I should write a book about retrospective. And I reread that book and I said, no, there's no need to write another book about retrospective. That book has plenty in it. And before writing one, yes, there are new concepts that like the whole complexity space, Canavan, all that sense making has advanced, but the core concepts and I think are still there. So it's valuable as it is. Another one that is really good is Pat Kua's book that kind of builds on the role of the facilitator. So that one and the Derby and Larson book are, in my opinion, the only 2 that I would go to, and I had a lot of value.
Let's make sure, or I will afterwards, to get links in the description for that for people. And a couple of questions for you. So in the gather data, you're talking about cause and effect. And when we look at complexity theory, and like you mentioned, Canavan talks about things aren't so straightforward. So are you saying that these 5 steps help us get past those really clear, obvious, straightforward, if we do this, we get that, and find more novel practices? So that's, I guess I have a couple of questions, but I'll stay there. Can you say more about that cause and effect?
Yeah. So, I mean, the framework itself, by following it, you reduce the chances to jump to conclusion, and
Gotcha.
You reduce the chances of habitual thinking. If you pace it, like with gather data, we are at a time where we're not solutioning. We're just looking at the what happened here. We get shared view of what happened. Everyone has a little piece of what happened. Nobody has everything. So this is a time to, again, we can use those 3 columns.
Yeah.
Or whatever we use. It's not necessarily bad. No. It can get routine, but it's a time where we collect information. We gather the data. When we generate insights, and this transition is where a framework like Canavan can help determine, okay, what are we looking at? Is this something that is clear to everybody? Have we seen it before? So this sense making, you mentioned earlier the word sense making, generating insights is kind of like doing that. It's a sense making and opening up to possibilities. So yes, it helps if you kind of like pace it in that format where you look at the what, and then look at so what do we make of this? Is this a clear problem? Is this something complicated? Is it something that is in the complex space? What kind of like agreement or can we get to in how much time is it going to take to find a alignment on this? Ultimately, there is not enough time to fix everything. That's the other thing that I see very often, and
we take no time for the retro. People get anxious after 30 minutes. And you're talking, we need at least an hour for this to do it well, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least an hour. Yeah, I think usually my preference is an hour and 15. And this 15 minutes might seem like, oh, what the hell? Why do you need 15? And it's for a team of like 5 on 6. Those 15 feels like you get to the next level. But yeah, less than that. And again, it's very contextual. Some really high performing team they can do it faster. But it's a mindset. It's a mindset that doesn't try and fix everything. And that is the difference, because even if you have like 10 hours, you're not going to fix everything. You always find something else and so you must prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever is facilitating, and this kind of touches also on the role, is someone running this? Is there like an external facilitator?
Yeah.
Or is there, facilitator? Or is there just someone that is at least using facilitative techniques? Because you might not have like a dedicated person doing it, but there must be an understanding that, okay, we need to prioritize some of this stuff in order to get to a now what? Because eventually you have to decide what to do. A purpose of a retrospective is to take some action. If you just talk, then that's why many people feel like, okay, what's the point of this? We're just talking and talking and talking. It becomes a complaining session. So
It's
yes,
nice every once in a while, right? The complain fest, but not all the time.
yeah, I mean, eventually there's like okay, now what? What are we doing about it?
Yes.
And maybe there's nothing we need to do,
Mm-hmm.
but at least prompting that and leaving time to think about it is important. But yeah, when I guess 60-70% of the time is spent just like airing grievances, that's not that's not ideal.
I would think it would also unwind a little bit of the psychological safety, because we start to feel bad and we start to maybe guilt trip ourselves and each other.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing too in these steps, like on set stage, is more of the why, then the what, then reactions to that, so what, and then decide now what. Is that
Yeah,
close?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Wow, I have so many questions. The second one I had is, you were talking about preparing for a
Yeah.
retrospective. And related to that, you're also talking about how you maybe facilitate retrospectives from your position of developer. So how do you pregame and get ready for a retro? What are some things that help? And then as a facilitator, are you also participating in the retro? Or my next couple of questions here.
Yeah. So I mean, the preparation, also the participation is an interesting one.
Okay.
I mean, when you prepare, is really like, I remember as a developer, which is why I kind of like switched into more like a product manager, was to give myself more time to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
So as a developer, I would ask questions to the team, kind of like, hey, is there anything on your mind about what happened this week? So that if there was like a pattern, like in a team, for example, I was hearing things about the backlog, how I was working with our backlog. And so we then themed the retrospective on how is working with our backlog, or how can we, I don't remember how I phrased it, but how can we make working with our backlog even better?
Okay.
And so that can be like a theme. So finding out if there is something on people's mind is one way to do that. I feel that both as a developer and a product manager, I was always trying to probe and chat with the team and see, is there something that we want to discuss on retro? And this kind of like goes hand in hand with my other mindset that I really don't like when I hear, oh yeah, we should talk about it in retro. And retro becomes the kitchen sink of all the discussions. So everything, oh yeah, we can discuss it in retro. But my mindset is, what's stopping us from discussing it right now? Mm-hmm. What's stopping us from doing something about it right now? And so that on some teams, we had a continuous timeline where events, so this gathered data was done throughout the week. Gotcha. So we wouldn't wait on the retro day to collect events. We would do it daily. Mm-hmm. And then we would have, because then people were like, I was telling them during retro, we will look at overarching patterns. We won't look at everything. There's not going to be enough time. Right. So what I suggested is, if there is something that you'd like done about one of those items, just put a little dot next to it. And after stand-up, after the daily stand-up, we'll just look at it and discuss, hey, let's do something about it. So yeah, probing and making sure that we have not just like not that we just prepare this like massive retro that tackles everything by magic, but that we have this mindset of continuously improving and doing it daily in some cases, in some teams, not for everybody. And then the preparation, I guess, was also often about the activities as well, depending on where the team was, switching it up. The Gata data could be something that was as simple as 3 columns, or something that used a metaphor like a sailing boat, or recently I published a Star Wars themed retrospective.
I
Those
want
are
to see
themes.
that. We'll get the link to that.
Oh yeah, we can put that link. And so but again, it's not for everybody. So if the team doesn't know what Star Wars is, or are not into that, it's not ideal. But again,
or
you can
I'm a
switch
Trekkie. I was like, what are you talking?
Right.
Star Wars. I like Star Trek over here.
Right. A few weeks back, we had this workshop where we designed your own fun retrospective. Oh. So what is your team into? So maybe it's into hiking. You can use a hiking metaphor, or into sports and soccer. So we had this group that created a retrospective where the metaphor was that you are a soccer team traveling Europe and has to impress the Queen of England or something. So you can create those things based on your context and then apply them. So during the preparation phase, it can be as simple as just like, okay, let's think of activities. There was this team where we use a TRIZ activity, which is one of the liberating structure ones, to use, they call it creative destruction. So like think about the worst thing. So switching those things up, avoiding the kind of like mellow approach that is always the same is what I tend to do. And you'll always need some preparation, even when you become like a master facilitator. I don't think I am, but from books that I read, every master facilitator says you still have to do some preparation. And
so it sounds like to me in stand-up, sometimes I don't, did you talk about what impeded the team? So it sounds like you're looking for things you could evolve as part of the plan for the next 24, or maybe there were things big enough that you hang on to them until the retrospective is. So there's like Kaizen moment every day. Can you say a little bit more about how that worked?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about the continuous timeline, I assume, like what goes on that timeline.
And the gather data. So some things you say, let's address now after stand up, or, in the next 24 hours. And maybe some things you say, let's examine that a little bit more during the retro. So I'm just wondering if you could help me see a little better what that looked like.
Yeah. I think that it always kind of like depend on like what some of those things were. For example, one example that was postponed until retro was this developer noticed that by entering a test credit card, you would go through the checkout process for this online shop. And that's the kind of thing that let's just tackle it immediately. We don't, why wait until back then? Right. At the same time,
identified like fraud, maybe we deal.
Right.
Okay.
And so those things we can still put them in the Gata data. If we use a timeline of the last week, what are the things that emerged? It's fine to have it there. It doesn't mean that the retro will not discuss any of that. It means that if there's something that can be done, that we think can be done, and if all it takes is like 3 minutes discussion, then let's do it. So at the same time, if we feel like putting it on that continuous timeline, and this time the continuous timeline, it works for some teams and it doesn't for others. Some teams just don't add anything to it. Right. But it's very contextual, and trying it is kind of like part of this continuous like improvement.
I would think with the close section, like you try a timeline, and then in closing you do a quick little how is that retro, and if people don't like the timeline, then don't do it again.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is usually when I go into a new team, I used to go in kind of full, well, it depends, but everything depends. But sometimes it's not good to bring in too much change. But the one thing that is critical that I always bring in is this close on how was this meeting? between 0 and 4, where 0 is a complete waste of time, 4 is the best meeting of your life, and in between you have like the 1, 2, and 3. Okay, what's your number? What's your return on time invested? And what is your plus and delta? What is the plus? Something you liked about this session? What is a delta? Something that would have made you go up 1 point, one idea that would have make it from a 0, from a complete waste of time, to a 1, which is a learn something, to a little bit better. That to me is critical. That I have very little room for not doing, because without that, you're blind. And then you just have to imagine or read people. But asking this, and this is anonymous, is a very effective way to look for patterns, to see, like, music is another example. There was this group, and I was putting on some very mellow instrumental music, but still the feedback was music during the, I don't remember, I think it was during the generating insights, was disturbing. So okay, that's how you find out. But yeah, that's just an example of something that to me is really important in the close.
Yeah, I like to do that for any meeting. Sometimes I'll have red, yellow, green cards, grab one, throw it anonymously in a box, and then we'll look at that return on time invested for any meeting. And there's something about this transparency, right? You're talking about, we can read people, but now maybe I have a storyline in my head to, while it's anonymous, it's open and transparent, and we can start to, again, maybe look for some of these patterns and understand trust and psychological safety and whatever else.
Yeah.
Also in the plus delta positives, two things about this. Sometimes you do the positives first and then the changes. Oh man, now we're ending on a low note. So sometimes I switch those. Also in the delta, don't just tell me what needs to change. Maybe start to even explain what would the change be. I don't know. Do you do things like that?
Definitely the high note. So the return on time invested is good. Depending on, again, on the team, appreciation is sometimes the very last thing I like to do. So a round of appreciations on, hey, let's remember this last 2 weeks. What is something that someone did on the team that you appreciated? And again, we as facilitator, we need to be okay with uncomfortable silences. But if you count to 5 or 10 in your head, someone will start saying something. Or you can also have it written on a post-it and share it digitally that way. But that is, I like to end on a high note. So the roti, depending on the team, can be not the best way to end it. I think to me, the delta is more like a way to look for patterns, to kind of like see how it's going and to keep track of those kind of like the trend of the numbers. So the roti was like, I kept graphs of like, and kept printed and shared with a group on a Miro board or on a wall when we were in the room, to kind of like see where we are. Because to me, what's important is saying, okay, we went from up here to down here. Something shifted in those 3 months. So noticing those things is important to me more than the actual nitty-gritty feedback. Of course, the music is an example, or some team just love those 3 columns. And so like receiving that feedback is important. If it's actionable, even better.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's kind of like the space.
Hey, let's check in, see if we have anything in chat while we're here. Not yet. If you do have any questions for us, please feel free.
Yes. And to participate, I think you had the second portion of the question, which was like, how do you participate? So I was tech lead. I was a principal engineer. I had like very strong ideas of like what to do. You need to, and I needed to kind of realize that strong ideas loosely held. And so when you kind of like think you're right, then you are going to have a very, very hard time facilitating. Basically, you're not facilitating.
Mhm.
And so understanding your biases, we're all biased at some level. But when you're in that position of like leadership or manager kind of like situation, it's even harder. And so, I mean, there are many tricks that you can do, but first you need to realize that how difficult it is and just be humble. That yes, you might have like the most seniority, but understanding where the group is and um, it's important as a next step. And then playing the okay, I'm as a product manager, I was kind of like in the same space, so I was facilitating, and I was saying, look, when I'm gonna like talk as a product manager, I'm gonna say, hey, I'm gonna take my facilitator hat off, and as a product manager, and blah blah yada yada yada. Or well, I'm a product manager now, but I was an engineer for 20 years. As an engineer, taking my hat as an engineer on, this is yada yada yada, and then I'm gonna put my facilitator hat back on. I do that only if I feel that nobody in the group is in that space. If someone is already there, I don't feel my input is adding anything valuable, then I wouldn't bother doing it. But there was this case where I had experiences with Linux virtual machines, and one of the engineers didn't. So I was a product manager at the time, and I said, "Look, as an if you want, and blah blah blah," and that works out. So it's you do participate, and you try and recognize how much you're biased, and you must, and this is very hard, understand at what point you need someone from the outside to help you. And the outside doesn't necessarily mean a contractor, it can mean someone from another team.
Right.
And doing this sharing facilitation is
Yep.
to me a very effective way to reach that next level where you have someone that is even more unbiased because it comes without context and is there purely to facilitate the meeting. So you can create a facilitator community of practice in your company and share this role, and that helps even more. So you can fully participate and have, like, again, if you're a product manager or a tech lead or a developer has a stake on the topic. So yeah, that's kind of like the participate portion.
I had a yellow safety vest when I was Scrum Master developer, and I would put this day glow safety vest on. And it was a reminder to me as well with that safety vest on and kind of psychological safety. I'm facilitator, and I'd stand up, put that on. It was a reminder to me as well as everybody else. And if I took it off and sat down, that's me as participant to help me as well as others realize what's going on there.
Yeah. I mean, after COVID, I think we
Uh-huh.
can use masks as a way to do that. When I'm
That's
wearing the
funny.
mask, I'm
Right.
talking as a
I can't talk or participate. What? Say more about that. That's funny. I wonder too, with outside facilitator, I mean, you have to balance that, I think, with there's a perspective that retrospective is like Vegas rules. What happens in the retro stays in the retro. It's only for the team, no outsiders allowed. Um, I think on demand, when a team starts to say, we're okay with an outsider, then we can start to have guest facilitator and other things. Are there things that you watch out for as far as should it be team only? Can we have outsiders? Can we have a guest facilitator? What do you look for
yeah.
in the team to make those decisions?
I mean, when I go in with a new team, like you kind of have to do that during that preparation.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what's the temperature. If people don't want an external facilitator there, I wouldn't take on that role
Mm-hmm.
because there is something else happening. The external facilitator should bring in even more unbiased and there should be trust. I mean, trust is really at the base of this. So when there is that situation, I feel there is a lack of trust. Maybe not so much in me or in the external facilitator, but in the reason why are we calling someone external. And so reasoning on that, and rather than entering to doing a retrospective, is helping on why is there this friction. so that is, and especially, I mean, the International Association of Facilitators has a list of values that they follow. So they're there to serve the group. They're not there to serve like someone in the business. And I think if there is like this mistrust, then I wouldn't go and I would try and investigate and let my stakeholder know, hey, look, this is not, it's not good to get in there. Maybe I can like help whoever is facilitating right now, ask this person, like, what do you see? Where is the friction?
Mm-hmm.
The only for the team portion, again, what is the purpose of a retrospective? To me, it starts with the 12th Agile principle, which is that regular cadence. The team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a team effort. But now, who is a team? What is a team? It's kind of like up for debate.
Right.
To me, it should be open to whoever we feel we need to have in there. And sometimes it's very useful to have someone that can influence things that is outside of our circle of control. And so it can be useful to have that person in there. It's also important to make sure that team is okay having this person in there. If this person is the manager, like the person that decide who gets promoted or not, so there are so many considerations to make. In general, I'm not opposed to having people external according to the team needs.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess I'm trying to bust a couple of myths that the retrospective needs a little bit more length. It can't be so short. We need time to go through these steps and see some divergence before we try to converge in on a situation, and that it is okay to have outsiders in, but you better know your team and understand if you have that level of trust. And once again, it all comes down to trust.
Yep.
And that you were talking about being a licensed facilitator and some of the principles and values. Do you want to say more about that? Or I also see you
so the
putting some
IAF
graphics
is
up here. Where you want to go?
Yeah. So I mean, the IAF is just an international association of facilitators.
Okay.
I'm technically not certified. I'm actually staying away from any certification just as a choice. Mm-hmm. Since 2001, when I started working, and I realized that there was Microsoft like certification for doing stuff, and I'm like, why do I need this thing? Mm-hmm. But I have to say, IAF is an organization, international organization of facilitators, not just in tech, but in all sorts of things. And it's a pool of like-minded people for me that have a series of values that I don't remember like step by step, but it's a space where I invite people to join. I only joined a couple of years ago, if they want to explore even more the topic of facilitation. So it's there is a lot of cross-pollination that is interesting between people that facilitate in different environments and Agile and tech. So that I found interesting to mention and to invite people there.
So imagine I'm a third grader and I want to know, what is facilitation, Enrico? Explain to me like I'm in third grade. What does that look like?
So you basically there's actually a video online about this, and it's really good. And they say, what does a facilitator do really? And there are like 3 roles.
Okay.
You're an architect, you're a pilot, and you're a guide. You're an architect when before the session, you design the session with your group or your client, and so that you're like preparing for like with a little plan. So you're designing something that has a supple design, something that can withstand, that is flexible, can withstand a little bit of change. It's not just structure that will crumble on the first thing that kind of varies. So you have to be an architect, and you do that before the session. So that's number 1.
I like that.
And you're a pilot.
Word supple. So I think
Yeah,
resilient in here, but a supple design. That's nice. I like
that's
that one.
actually from DDD. That's where I learned that word, from the Domain-Driven Design book. That's where I'm ESL, English second language for me, but supple, I remember hearing it for the first time in that book.
Uh-huh.
And it's very much like with software. I see like those sessions that I design now as a facilitator. Anyways, the pilot portion is you need to basically welcome the group and say, okay, this is the plan for today. We're going to go from A to B. This is the plan. But you also have to be ready to withstand turbulences and changes of plans. It's not, in some cases, where you have very kind of like clear situation, it can be like a straight flight, a straight shot. We have to be ready for everything. And this is why I really love this stuff, because we never really 100% know. You cannot know it. And if you try and force it, it's just backfire, or you just do a poor job, really. Some people use the word facilitation.
Facilitation. Yeah. Manipulation, facilitation, facilitation.
Yeah. Isn't that right? And so you're a pilot because you do that kind of like you help the group, and you're also like prepare, make sure that the plane is ready, there is fuel in it, things are in the right spot. For example, your mirror board is like ready to be used, and you have accesses and all that. So that's part of the role. And the guide is helping the group going through conversations, helping them dealing with the stress of like tension, and going through what Kahner calls the diamond of participatory decision making. You mentioned convergence.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like divergence first.
Yeah.
To then converge, and divergence is where you get different ideas. You get more different ideas. Yeah. And usually what happens is we kind of like stop here at the very beginning. We get into that habitual thinking.
Yep.
And this is where the linear thinking that we mentioned at the beginning, the cause and effect, this is the problem, here's how we fix it. We never really go through this because it feels painful. Yes. And especially in here, Kahner calls this the groan zone.
Right.
And this is painful. This is where the facilitator helps, keeping the group together, helping them cope with the tension and making sense of what's going on, to then start converging, having like a plan, having an idea, next step, and
without
then
people checking out, right? As we
of course,
get rid of some ideas, combine some. I think as facilitator in that groan zone, you have to watch out for overeager or people just backing off.
Yep. And this reminds me, what I'm gonna share is on my Twitter account, I have I made a slide of this.
Oh, all right.
And so, where is it? Yeah. So, yeah, let's see if we can see it here. Yeah, so this is much better. And so this is that business as usual thinking. And like going through, like getting this diverse perspective, like generating possibilities is kind of key to, in some cases, again, the facilitator is a generic role, and you can facilitate something like that doesn't require divergent thinking. Maybe you're facilitating a session that is just about sharing ideas. Not all sessions require making decisions. Some sessions are about sense making. But yeah, the groan zone is this space where people are kind of like getting bored and tired. And like you say, they check out, especially online. Yeah. So now that we're online, even shorter sessions are important, or kind of breaking it out, inviting people to stand up and move to activate the brain. And then the convergence is like, we kind of like, okay, let's get to a decision point. So
and pop the cork of the champagne. That's good. I like
and
that.
pop the cork of the champagne. Yeah, if you like it. The other thing is like sometimes you have an overarching goal, and you have a session goal. So realizing that the session itself might not be enough time. So you might want to, okay, what is the strategy for 2020? We might need to, and that goes back to the architect portion, realizing where there's no way that we can do that in an hour. And this, touching back on retrospectives, we are sometimes getting to the end of the hour, and we feel like, oh, we need to rush through those action items. And my approach is, okay, let's hold off. Rather than rushing through things, what is important, and what is the next wise step that we can take? Shall we have a separate session where we decide what to do? Who are we going to invite? What is going to be the purpose of that follow-up session? Rather than just rushing into, okay, let's make the code better. That's not an action item. And yes, you can use stuff like SMART, like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. You can use those to kind of like realize, make the group realize. Again, the group has to realize it. As a facilitator, you have to kind of like refrain from being of use. Telling people what to do is not facilitation. So you have to invite them and ask them, okay, is this SMART? Is this specific? Is this measurable? Is this achievable in a week? So that is kind of like the role. And it's hard, it's really hard, especially when we have a background in tech, or we have a stake in the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I'm appreciating here, I think, Enrico, is you're saying, yeah, we need to pay attention to time, but trying to cram everything in a small time box might not work out. So let's, as we get closer to the end of a time box, evaluate, do we need more time? Can we really, in a high quality way, find closure on this, or do we need another session? So time boxes have their place, but it's not the be all end all. That could make you a fuse when you're like, hey, time, we gotta make a decision. You just lit the fuse.
Yeah, totally. And I think, again, this framework is really good at that, because if you follow it, and again, you decide, okay, I'm gonna close 10 minutes before the hour. I'm gonna start deciding what to do 15 or 20 minutes before the end of the hour. You know that you're kind of there. And a little tip as a facilitator is, it's a great thing to do is, okay, we're halfway through the time for this.
Yes.
Just remind the group. And again, as a facilitator, you can have someone helping you with this stuff. You can just ask someone in the group, hey, can you help me with time? Halfway through this, can you give us a reminder, so that not everything is on you? And especially with small teams, sharing this stuff, you can get to a very good point where you can share this facilitation techniques between the group, and you don't necessarily need an external person to kind of like to do it. But yeah, decide what to do is there for a reason, to kind of like, okay, what are we doing next? And yes, oftentimes it has to be an action item. It has to be this way. It has to be in the backlog. Well, it depends. Most importantly, something, yes, has to be done, and there has to be clarity about what's happening next and the people involved.
So the decision might be, we decide to follow on with this later, or the decision is, make sure production doesn't fall over again. But it needs to be something very tangible on the decision side. I know I'm making up.
And I think if we say we do it later, do it later is not good enough. We need to say, okay, we're going to do it Monday between 2:30 and 3. It's going to be Luke, Andrew, and Anna. The purpose of this conversation is going to be X. The outcome of this conversation is going to be Y. The reason we do it, very tangible. I'm going to get my other headset. Oh no, it's just here because my AirPods are dying.
But, well, we're almost out of time too, so that's good.
Yeah, so I'm just going to turn this on.
Try to get used to my AirPods. I'll do. As you're doing that, talking about with facilitator, sometimes I'll give that out. Like, I think if you were on my team and I was a scrum master, I might ask Enrico, would you like to take notes out loud? Or I might ask Alice, would you mind paying attention to time? And Bob, would you be the stacker? That's a role I like, where if people are trying to, especially in the virtual world, they're trying to raise their hand and get attention of somebody, then I have somebody specific that actually writes down a stack of names, and then we'll pop the stack. We'll go through that and somewhat distribute the facilitator role, so I can focus, like on the retro. Did I lose you? You're back to your AirPods.
No. Yeah, I'm back to my AirPods because this guy is not feeling like he wants to connect. I guess it's
Uh-oh.
an early birthday present from my bossy. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave them on, and hopefully they'll pop up on the Bluetooth connection.
Chat disconnected.
And worst case, I can put you out of my laptop, but there might be some echo on that. That's what I was trying to avoid.
They're definitely still connected. That's good. Signed out.
Do you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So I think we're okay with the live stream, and it's 50 past the hour. What would you like to say in conclusion? Bring it home for us, Enrico.
I mean, retrospectives are really the most important, like, of the Agile ceremonies. The principle 12, I think, is the core one to kind of like approach Agile or any purposeful and fun workplaces. So if you're trying to switch things up, introducing this this session is a great way to start. It'll open up a world of possibilities and a world that was unknown to me as a software developer, which spent hours reading books after work at the beach. I was reading stuff about tech. Mm-hmm. And I then switched to reading things about the human brains and people, because it's really vast, but it can really change and how you do work, and in my opinion, make it more fun and enjoyable. Like, very often, unfortunately, retrospectives are linked to activities. So there is and this is why I started with the help of other facilitator, the Principle 12 initiative with Agile Alliance, to make it more visible what an Agile retrospective and what the Principle 12 is about. It's not about having fun with a thing, a retrospective that has some Star Wars pictures. That's why I created mine, because there are many out there that are basically what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do differently, but with a Yoda picture on it. And that's not, unfortunately, the retrospective. We should do this divergence. We should follow those 5 steps. And fostering that, in my opinion, will make your teamwork even more effective. So hopefully during this hour or so, we gave you some insights in what that is. If you have any questions, like, feel free to hit me on Twitter or LinkedIn, or join the Principle 12 initiative, which is a community where people share stories about retrospectives.
Sounds great. Thank you, Enrico. I really appreciate the time. I'm going to go ahead and end our live stream here. Let me get over there. Maybe.